Okay, welcome everybody. So delighted to have you all here. So incredibly thankful to our amazing advocates for being a part of this beautiful experimental conversation. I hope that you will join us in conversation and that there will be more questions that come from the answers that are provided. Um, the goal here is to help people feel supported on their respective journeys. I think that we all have tools and insights to learn journeys. So I hope this will just be helpful for everybody that tunes in. We got some really beautiful questions, and I'm excited to dive into those. The first one was, growing up, I never learned to navigate emotions. I now have a 5-year-old, and I am trying to make sure that he grows up learning to recognize and deal with his emotions in a way that I did not. But lacking the skills myself, it can be challenging. He watched and loved the first Inside Out movie. With the second one in theaters, we're trying to decide whether or not to let him see or if he's still too young to be introduced to emotions like anxiety. What are your thoughts on this? Any tips for raising emotionally intelligent kids, and maybe like a cheat sheet for age appropriate emotion conversation and exposure guidelines? So, Michelle, would you like to answer or give some insight on this question?
Yes, absolutely. Um, I love this question. Um, I have worked in play therapy at one point in my journey, and I actually, the majority of my practice was military children, and it seemed to be around the age of about 8 or 9. I had quite a few little ones with anxiety-like symptoms, and that, it wasn't what they called anxiety, but their parents were presenting with some behaviors and concerns and some ideas, that they might be experiencing some anxiety. There's some interesting statistics around anxiety in children in military communities. Um, Military kids are more likely than a civilian child to experience anxiety at a younger age. Military children are also more likely to develop coping skills at a younger age than civilian children. And so I think it is an important conversation for our community, and just it's very possible that a child will show signs of anxiety maybe before you even realize what they are. I thought the Inside Out movie was a beautiful format to introduce emotions to children. Dr. Kristen Neff, she is someone I follow and recommend a self-compassion network, and she does a lot of amazing research. And she was a consultant on the movie and how the emotions were presented, and self-compassion and how that's used. So, in addition to the emotion of anxiety, there was a lot more going on in the movie. And Inside Out one, they introduce the primary emotions, which are the first emotions to develop in any human, which are sadness, joy, fear, disgust, and anger. In this second movie, they're introducing more complex emotions because Riley is going through puberty. So, in addition to anxiety, they introduce embarrassment, envy, and ennui, which is boredom. And it's a fantastic character. Anyone who has a teenager is really going to appreciate ennui. But in addition to just that introducing emotions, it also introduces the concept of a sense of self, and a sense of self that is based on a belief system. It introduces that there's a loss of sense of self during puberty, or that it's changing and evolving. It introduces bottled up or suppressed emotions. It introduces denial and sarcasm, ways that these complex emotions can function within a person. And so I think that representation is a beautiful introduction to further conversations that you can have in your family. My absolute favorite aspect of the movie is it really, as the storyline develops, it really uses some IFS, internal family systems, by Dr. Richard Schwartz, that there are no bad parts. It's okay to feel all emotions, that no emotion is bad, that we shouldn't always feel joy, that there's complexity. And it's a beautiful representation. It's very possible for a 5-year-old that won't resonate with them. An anxiety character will go right over their head, and it's not something that they really connect to, but it's still a beautiful opportunity to introduce a complex emotion that they may later feel. And it's a beautiful conversation, that the difference between fear And anxiety is fear is afraid if what is happening right in front of you. There's something dangerous that you need to adjust yourself in. Whereas anxiety is thinking about things that may happen in the future that could potentially be dangerous. And that differentiation is really important. And I think just beautifully represented in the movie. And rarely do children's movies tackle sense of self and emotional development. So it's just, I found it beautiful. I think it's great for all ages. I think a lot of adults are being touched by it. You know, a lot of people are talking that they're crying at the movie, that their parents are crying. The kids are laughing and enjoying it, and parents are crying. So it's a beautiful message for all ages, in my opinion.
Thank you for that. Shelley, did you want to add to that? Oh, we can't hear you. Okay, while she's navigating that, I think Sarah, you wanted to also, or I'm sorry, Sarah, did you want to add to the question? How about now? Okay.
I echo a lot of what Michelle said in that the way it's portrayed is just so normalized and natural. We took our children to see it ages 3 to 8, and it was very comfortable. From like a sport and performance psychology lens, we welcome anxiety. We actually want you to have some anxiety to perform and reach your goals. So in answering that question, worried about them being introduced to those emotions, I wouldn't worry about that. And I don't want to repeat too much of what Michelle said, but some forms of anxiety to some levels are good. And like I said, welcomed. There's a couple great books that I've enjoyed as a parent, trying to navigate all the emotions that they experience and then how I'm matching those. One is Daring Greatly, how the courage to be vulnerable transforms the way we live, love, parent, and lead. And then also there's a book called The Upside of Stress that I also really enjoy, and it helps paint that emotion in a different light. So if you grew up without a lot of emotional awareness, that is a book that can help, like I said, paint that in a different light.
Thank you, Sarah. Did anybody else have other perspectives or insights that they'd like to share regarding this question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm so glad. Okay. Yeah, I love this question. I thought it was so just powerful to even ask it because I feel like we all kind of can resonate with it and struggle with it, especially when maybe we haven't grown up being taught what anxiety was, or it wasn't even really mentioned in our families. And I think now the older generations are kind of more like, oh, that's what I've been feeling all these years. And it's just, it's kind of fun. I feel like now working in mental health, having more and more people come in and just being like, oh, wow, I've never talked about this before. And so now we're kind of on this cusp of being the parents to these little ones and getting to have these conversations with them and introduce these concepts of emotions and being able to talk about them. So it's just fun and exciting, but overwhelming at times. So I feel like having these movies like Inside Out, oh gosh, I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm anxious right now.
I totally understand that. No, and I think that it's an important emotion to I'm experiencing anxiety because there's a huge spider that is crawling on my laptop right now. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Okay.
That's good. I needed
Sorry
a
about
comic
that, y'all.
relief spider, actually. That worked out perfect.
Yes. Well, anyways, okay. Yeah, I think that it is I think it's a really important topic, and I think it's also important to highlight that this parent cares so deeply for their child that they really want to ensure that they're allowing them the space to navigate their own emotions in a way that maybe they were not able to do so. For me, I was never able to be anything other than happy. So being sad or angry was never tolerated. I was a brat, or I was ungrateful, or XYZ if I exhibited anything other than my human emotions. And so now as a mother, I can resonate so deeply with this question, because the things that were not tolerated in me are the things that I see in my son now. And I'm like, okay, I have to be present and keep it together and name what he is experiencing so that he has the words to share, because he's having tantrums because he doesn't have the words, right?
Yep.
So I thought it was really beautiful that this parent was just reaching out to really get those tools that are helpful for her son and for herself as she navigates parenthood, and then also trying to navigate her own emotions that maybe were not tolerated in her as a child. So
you talking about like being able to name those emotions with your kid. We've been able to use the movie to say, remember when joy felt this way or anger felt this way, and now anxiety. And so it's just another plug for watching that with your kids, because if you're struggling to name the emotion or explain the emotion, that movie does it just beautifully, because they resonate with characters of any movie. So you can relate it back to that for them. And that's created some really good conversations for us and our 8-year-old this summer, who's she's my girl, and she's just lots of things going on. So there's just sort of another edge or vantage point to watching that movie with your kids.
Yeah.
thank you.
I think that's
Yeah,
why it's so nice to have these types of movies, because it gives like actual faces and bodies and personification to these things that are really intangible for kiddos. They just, you say anxiety, what is that? What does that look like? And I feel like by having these characters with these faces and their expressions and these situations that they're going through, you can say like, that's anxiety. That's what's going on. I haven't gotten to see Inside Out 2, but I can't wait. But yeah, Alex, more kind of what you were saying is when we grow up not able to express things and it's only okay to be giggly and happy, it makes it really, really tough to navigate our other emotions. And so I feel like that's what I was trying to say is we're kind of at this point generationally where we get to have these conversations with our kids and make it okay. And kind of to Sarah and Michelle's point, where we're celebrating all of our emotions, not just the good ones. And really allowing kids to realize like that's part of being human, is to have all these emotions and it's okay. And then just showing them, okay, if this emotion does tend to bubble up, this is how we're gonna walk through it together. This is how we're gonna process it and regulate together, which can be difficult at times, but I feel like I did come up with just a few like ideas, kind of what you were saying, like when we're watching something, watching the movie, having that conversation of, oh, this character's feeling this way, but maybe even making a game out of it throughout the day of just like, okay, show me an angry face. What does anger look like? Let's act it out. What does anxiety look like? Is it butterflies in our tummy? Different things like that. I listened to one podcast the other day. It was a mom and a kid, and they were making up words for emotions, and they were actually mixing excited and scared, and they made sighted, and it just was such a sweet combo. Where the kiddo was saying, "I'm excited for my talent show later on." Um, a little scared, a little nervous, but I'm so excited to go and perform with my friends. And I just thought that was so beautiful. Just a way to like make it fun and not this like big lecture where you're sitting down like, let's talk about anxiety, not to freak them out, but just make it more fun, especially if, this parent was asking about a 5-year-old. It doesn't need to be scary or this big lecture. It needs to be fun and make it cool.
I just wanted to add, as far as resources go, there is a simple feelings chart that you can Google. You can just Google kids feelings chart or kids feelings faces, and you can buy them, you can print them, and it's literally just like kids' faces making all the silly faces from envy, anger, rage, guilt, all happy, joyful, embarrassed, and you can have this chart up, and if you're struggling to like connect or to understand, it's a simple practice when coming from your day from school or preschool or at the end of the night, and say, Where are you today? When I was in private practice and play therapy, it was sitting on the wall. And every child that walked in, part of our practice was, what are you feeling today? Or if you were in the middle of a story, what were you feeling? And it was a beautiful way to integrate visualization and naming with children as young as 5 years old. And it's simple and it's fun and it's a beautiful representation to have these conversations, because the movie would just introduce these topics. It all matters on where you go with that and continuing the conversation and growing upon it. So that's one resource that is free and it's on the internet. You can Google it.
Thank you, Michelle. I know Caitlin wanted to hop in and add a little more to this.
Yeah, I'll just finish it up because this was such a beautiful swirl, and I'm noticing how I didn't quite fully realize how much I was gonna love being able to have a conversation with different people in like this realm together. It's so yummy. And also, Shelley, just so beautiful that you revealed exactly what was happening inside of your body. That is like what I was wanting to contribute in that. I'll go back for a moment. Like the felt sense of energy of anxiety is something that we feel in the womb, and it is like the protective part of us that wants to grasp for any part of our experience that's unknown. And so I think anxiety, like how it shows up, is different, obviously, from a 2-month-old to like a 3-year-old to a 10-year-old to us. But just being able to like acknowledge that it's just a part of our experience, like everyone has said, that it is welcomed, that it is has positive intent. Like we witnessed that in Inside Out too. She loved her so much. What was the character? The main character.
Riley.
Riley?
She loved Riley so fiercely. She loved her. She wanted to protect her from all of the possible things. And so when we have that understanding of her, she's not scary. But Alex, you highlighted that so beautifully, that this question came from the deepest care of like, I want to do this the right way. I want to show my child that it can look different and we can have this different relationship with our emotions. And really, like the last thing I'll say is how we teach our children about emotions is how we meet the emotions within our own body. And so again, going back to you, Shelley, we could feel, maybe some of us could feel your prickly, lovely, like such good anxiety. Guess what? That's coming from your care, and you modeled it by outing it. And so it's just like I call it sports casting. So this mom, she could notice her own anxiety within herself and just name it. I'm noticing that I'm feeling a bit like my body's leaning forward, or however it shows up in her. And the children get to witness that and feel that, and it's modeled, which is often like one of the most powerful ways of teaching. So, and I'm kept like feeling my own body being like, this is like the best thing to talk about for me. Thank you. Thank you for this platform, Alex.
I love this so much. Like, this is the whole point. I think that everybody has these different lenses and perspectives, and obviously you all have your subject matter expertise. And so bringing that all together and providing different insights and tools is just so beautiful. The next question is, I've been a military spouse for 20 years. That, coupled with my utter lack of emotional intelligence, makes finding friends and building quality, lasting friendships challenging. I feel like I meet someone who seems cool, reach out, maybe have one outing, and then texting always goes one way with little response and things fizzle out. I know that people are busy, kids, jobs, etc. What are your best tips for making and maintaining friends as a grown-up?
There's quite a few military spouses in here, so I think all have probably some similar experiences to this, and you're not alone in this. Even friends I've had for a long time that are not military spouses have gone through this. I've had my fair share of what I call like friendship droughts, having lived in various state locations, especially overseas. It can be hard. I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that you lack emotional intelligence just because it's difficult to make friends or maintain friends. There could be a lot of different things going on, but I'd cut yourself some slack on that. The fact that you're acknowledging that there's this difficulty shows some awareness, and that's part of emotional intelligence. There could be lots of reasons, but when we're kind of like looking to find those friendships, there's definitely multiple routes you can try. The good old don't give up thing is real. Sometimes finding friends is just as hard as dating was. If you all remember dating a while ago, like there were definitely times where I felt like there's just no one out there for me. And it can be difficult and it can be daunting, but continuing to try, put in the effort. Maybe that's you being the one who reaches out more than once if something fizzles. Maybe it's finding people with similar interests or hobbies at a community event. There's there's the small town social, book clubs, gyms, definitely a lot of things that are easier said than done. And if you tend to go towards that introverted, more homebody type of personality, that could be a challenge. But finding those people and places that you're comfortable with is the important thing, and it's valid to just find your niche. Yeah, I think it requires effort. I think it doesn't, once you have your tribe, it can be a little bit easier, but sometimes making friends does require some work. For me, I have found when I've been in those droughts that like a phone call was more meaningful than a text if I was trying to like get something going. Or maybe if I invited someone to a coffee and like, paid for it or put in that effort to really make it meaningful for them, that is how it maintained momentum. But I would say not all is lost and you're not alone in that. And we'd be happy to hang out with you too and help find your people.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. I don't know. I'm assuming this person might be in our area because I feel like a lot of the followers are in the Moore County, but if they are not, I know that there is an app. I think it's a dating app too. It's called Hitch, I believe, but it's also for friendships. Like you're looking for people that have similar interests. So it's so interesting because I feel like I missed that dating app scene. So I don't know what it looks like, but someone was telling me that you can actually or maybe it's Bumble. I'm not sure if anybody can chime in on that if you know, but there are definitely other options.
I do think there is a Bumble version that is for friends. I'm not sure about Hitch, but I have heard and I've had friends go on it, and they said it's been a phenomenal experience. So I think there's something to it.
Did anyone else want to add to this question?
Yes. There's a book I really wanted to just mention. It's called Platonic by Dr. Marissa Franco. Platonic, it's how the science of attachment can help you make and keep friends. It's a great read. And the science of attachment, everyone's talking about attachment theory and attachment styles and understanding your own personal attachment style. She applies this same knowledge and information to friendships. And it really is based in the science of connection, like the human experience of connecting with others and how much vulnerability that requires to truly connect with another person. And so I really just enjoyed this book myself. If you're sciencey and like theory and like knowing like a little bit of self-discovery in your own attachment style, there's some of that. But it also talks about the importance of connection and all of the negative consequences of not connecting and the statistics behind loneliness and depression and anxiety and physical ailments and emotional. And so I really love that aspect of just understanding why friends are important, why we need a community, why we need rooted, why we need connected to each other. An important aspect of that book is that sometimes we get in this state of self-protection, right? We're not feeling like we can connect with other people, we cannot share. But that state of self-protection actually becomes self-harm because the biggest resource of getting through things is your ability to connect with others. That is, it's just so profound and so important. And one, she does give tips in the book, like based on what you might be interested in. And she also talks about one way to really connect with someone, which I found so beautiful and such a tribute to military communities, because it is a struggle when you're moving or you're here for a training and you're constantly moving every year to 2 years, things like that. But also, what I think military communities are really good at, and what she touches on in the book, is helping. The best way to form a connection from someone is accepting help, and of course offering help. That is how connections are made, and that is some of the truest, deepest connections, is that helping each other. And I think military communities and spouses are excellent at that. You can move to a town and meet a mom on a playground, and she will tell you the pediatrician, the pediatric dentist that takes your insurance, the orthodontist in town. Military wives are really great at helping people in that regard. So just taking that information, maybe using that book as a resource. And then, as was mentioned, the part about emotional intelligence, I was really drawn to that. And I don't know what you completely mean by that, or what sort of self-assessment you're doing in that regard, but doing the deeper self-work, turning inward and getting a deeper relationship with self will be the best thing that you can do for a deeper connection with others. There's this beautiful quote that you can only be connected to someone else at the level that you are connected to yourself. I love that quote. And so if you're feeling this disconnection, maybe start with yourself. Start with the connection with self, deepening into that and knowing your own energy so deeply that when you find it out in the world in another person, you're like, yeah, that's my person. That's my people, because you know it. It's so felt in you that when you see it out in the world, you're like, yes, we will vibe. We will get along. That's my girl, or guy. But I think that would be the like truest and best first step. It's just working on that relationship with self.
Thank you, Michelle. That was really beautiful and also insightful. I went ahead and shared, I know you shared a couple of book titles, so if you don't mind sharing those in the chat. I went ahead and added Platonic. I found the Amazon link for it, but I definitely want to read that. There's another really beautiful question regarding trauma and how to navigate that. I'm going to put that in the chat really quickly and I'll read it off. I grew up with a few traumatic circumstances, and through therapy, I've learned how that changes my thought processes and thinking patterns, etc. And while I understand rewriting those thought patterns take time, I feel like there's some deeply rooted things. And I feel that they are not only mental, but also physical. Like all the reels that apply to, like, if you experience XYZ, you might have chronic tension. I know how to work things on the mental side, but how do I keep my body to stop keeping the score? That's a very loaded question. And I feel like this is where somatics for me has been incredibly helpful. I'm an open book. I woke up in a hospital bed. This is a trigger warning. I had been sexually assaulted. I don't know what happened to me. My body, however, does remember. And there has been one particular moment where I had a visceral reaction while being intimate with my husband. And that was incredibly difficult for both of us, how to navigate that. And it's so hard because you don't know when this is going to show up. But for me, somatics, particularly breath work, has been so potent and powerful because it has helped me remove triggers from trauma so that I don't have to relive this experience that I don't remember, but I know that I'm releasing so much, and it has been profoundly impactful for me specifically. So I'd love to hear what you all have to say. If you want to raise your hand, whoever wants to go first.
Sure, I can go first. Yeah, this was a great question. And I just wanted to encourage, the writer of this question of just good job on continuing on this journey. And even though maybe you hadn't finally figured out kind of how to regulate both body and mind just yet, like you're working on it. And I feel like so many people kind of can show up in my office and just say, I've been trying so hard in therapy. I've been talking it all out and it's just I'm not getting anywhere. And so, Alex, I'm so glad that you brought up somatic work, because I really think that that's kind of like the new answer. When we have trauma, like you said, it can show up in our body in so many ways. We can feel restless, have a really difficult time relaxing, trouble sleeping, muscle tension, feeling really easily overwhelmed, brain fog, trouble focusing, panic attacks, headaches. And it can be super, super, super overwhelming, especially when you aren't like, it hits you and you aren't ready and you don't even know what triggered it maybe. Plus, I feel like trauma shrinks our window of tolerance. And so we may find ourselves more easily stressed over things that didn't used to stress us out. And that can be overwhelming and frustrating for people. And so you go and you get in therapy and you're like, okay, I'm here. I'm ready to do the work. Let's talk it out. And I feel like trauma doesn't really sometimes allow you to do that talking or even logically thinking things through, because it's now got you so, what do I want to say? Not overheated, but like your nervous system is so overworking to where you can't even logically think, and it's shut down that part of your brain. And that's where amazing things like somatic work come in. I feel like talk therapy is kind of like a top-down approach. And so when you have the top kind of shut off or it's not working at its full capacity, now you can do somatic stuff. And that's more from the bottom up, where you can start feeling safer in your body by doing maybe breath work or yoga, or I'm sure Caitlin has a lot of other ideas on how to do it. But I just love that somatic work is becoming more and more of a thing. Whereas like, kind of the tried and true traditional therapy, talk therapy is great and it's awesome and it's there for people and it's really readily available in our area. But it's just not working for a lot of people with trauma. So I'm so glad and thankful that we have people like you guys who are doing somatic work here in the area, because I think it's so needed for people with trauma.
I definitely think that they go hand in hand and they can complement each other beautifully. Again, it's that mind body connection, right? But
Yeah.
I think sometimes when you don't have the bandwidth to fully face that particular instant or circumstance, like it took me 6 years to really find some solace and some reprieve from that experience. It showed up in my pregnancy. It was so all encompassing in different ways, despite me not having memory of this particular instance, just knowing that that happened. But obviously your body keeps a score, it remembers, it stores it, it's energy, right? That's stored in our bodies. So
Right.
yeah, I'd love to hear, Caitlin, you're unmuted, so I think you're ready to chat.
Do you hear me breathing? I think there's so much to say that, to be honest, it's difficult for me to like know where to begin in answering these kinds of questions. But I want to say for the listeners who are listening and who might be thinking to themselves, maybe to them and their experience, they do not resonate with the word trauma as them having trauma. And so I just want to say that like the work of the body and the somatic realm, which somatic, just the root word is soma, just means body oriented or bottom up, like Shelley said. We all have a nervous system. We're all a body. And so like even as we're speaking, like my nervous system's meeting yours. And so anything that we experience lands in us and it fires all of these neural and somatic and limbic and hormonal pathways. And so when we know something logically, which is very helpful, it sounds like the person who asked this beautiful question has done some deep work to kind of understand her patterns and her thoughts. I'm having a hard time knowing who and how to talk to the question person, but that is such a beautiful place to begin making connections, and you can actually use that understanding to start to connect with how your body meets those thoughts and those patterns. There is a bit of a disconnect though that happens when we only know something logically and our body doesn't like know it like the gnosis felt sense experience. Like I'll go backwards. the reason why it's stuck is because it came through our nervous system first before your mind could make meaning of it. And so we must meet the nervous system when we want to fully integrate any given experience at any given time. And sometimes, yeah, there's so many different ways that we can do that. And it very much depends on someone's capacity to go there, their safetiness, their readiness. Sometimes we think we are ready and then we get engaged in the work and it's too much. And that to me is such a vital part of this work, is that we must always ask for permission with our parts and with the self. Because otherwise what we don't want to do with the work of somatics is snap the system to the point where we just fire another stress response. So I'm going into the details of it, but mostly there's so many resources, and perhaps together all of us could kind of come up with some resources, Alex, for this person, for the community, for like, what does this even look like? What is the world of somatics? Who do I, how could I engage in this kind of work? Might be a supportive way to move with it, because there's literally so much that I could say. So I'm going to let Michelle and Abby and whomever else speak on this. But mostly the wisdom of this individual for even considering that there's a missing piece is beautiful, and such an initiation into their next step.
Caitlin, that was beautiful. That very well done, well explained as a fellow somatic coach. That's beautiful. It's hard, I think, to grasp what we're talking about when we say somatic work, because like she said, it means body. So, some people are, you're doing a yoga class, you're doing a breath work class. Are you meditating? What is that practice and what does it look like? So it is a broad term that can encompass a lot. In the context of which I believe Caitlin and I practice as somatic coaches and therapists is individual sessions that create a container, create a space to allow for this connection, and to allow to start doing some parts work and to tap into that sense of health, self, and that body's innate ability to heal. And it's not just people who have had a trauma. The human experience is traumatic. It is especially traumatic in our current culture, in that our nervous systems were not developed to know the most tragic things that are happening in the world everywhere. We were not meant to know that much information, that much trauma, to be having a newsreel nonstop 24 hours a day, a ticker telling us all of the terrible things that are happening in the world. We were not developed for that. Our nervous systems were not developed for that. And that can relate back to our earlier conversations about anxiety. So getting out of our heads and getting out of the story and getting out of the narrative and the judgment and dropping into the body and connecting to self and connecting to those parts, that's somatic work. I love that more people know about it and are doing it and are encouraging it. I think it's beautiful. As we talk about resources, obviously I read a lot. I love good book. The body keeps a score. It's so important, especially in military communities. It's the groundwork for all PTSD research from the Vietnam vets on. It's a fantastic read, no matter who you are. I recommended it to my father-in-law. I recommend it to everyone. But there are options for you. There are ways that you can connect, even if it is a breath work class, if it's a yoga class, if it's a meditation. There are small ways to connect and to ground yourself. And then there are deeper internal practices, deeper self-work, just like psychotherapy, if that's something that you're interested in. And really only you will know when you're ready for that kind of work.
Alex, I think you said it beautifully when you said they pair well together. When you're talking about bottom up approaches and top down approaches. And I think perhaps Shelley or Caitlin, you had mentioned that when we experience traumas, we are often engaging in that bottom part of the brain, right? Or you alluded to that. And that bottom part of the brain is why bottom up approaches are so important, right? And that bottom up approach allows us to be in our body. And we're often in our body when we experience those traumatic experiences, whether those are little t or big T traumas, right? And those little t traumas are perhaps what you, Michelle, were referring to in regards to the state of our society, right? We were not even technology, where we are with technology, we that can feel very traumatic to kind of get a constant reel of this challenge is happening, this threat is happening, this chaos is happening, right? Our bodies are not meant to kind of process that level of emotion and turmoil. So I feel, at least in my experience, it has been when we can take that bottom up approach to traumatic healing or to therapy, it allows us to then get to a place where we can engage in our prefrontal cortex as a maintenance method, if that makes sense, right? So if we can heal by being in the body, being present, we can then move into that prefrontal cortex, which is that more developed brain, right? That more developed hemisphere, but honestly, the smallest hemisphere, right? So naturally, that's what goes offline when we're under stress, when we go into that fight, flight, or freeze response. So along with that, that book recommendation, Michelle, that you made about The Body Keeps the Score, there's another one, which is Widening the Window. And it's methods of widening our window of tolerance. And I think, Michelle, the very first time you and I ever met ages ago, years ago, we sat in a coffee shop and talked about window of tolerance.
I think we did. It was over 10 years ago.
It was. And so when I saw this book, I instantly thought of you. I was like, oh my gosh, Michelle and I talked about that a decade ago. And then another two that I really appreciate and often recommend to families or couples or individuals is It Didn't Start With You. So that might even go back to one of our initial questions of how do I didn't have a lot of emotional exposure, how to kind of navigate emotions. That wasn't something that was modeled for me. How do I do that for my child? That's a great one. And then also, What Happened to You? All of those kind of talk about that bottom up approach and little t, big T traumas. So I think everything that's already been said is spot on.
Sorry, thank you. I was trying to find all the books and add the Amazon links here. I think I missed one. I think it was It Didn't Start With You, or no, I did do that one. What was the last one that you mentioned, Abby?
That last one is What Happened to You? So it's essentially encouraging that shift from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, right? How have your experiences impacted and influenced you versus what we often do in the mental health field of just simply diagnosing, oh, you have anxiety, oh, you have depression, oh, you have this is what's wrong. It kind of looks at like, well, why is this manifesting? Why has this developed in your life? So I think it's super powerful and definitely pulls in some somatic or bottom up approaches.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I'm excited to share these books and these resources, and I feel like I want to read all of them. I have not been ready to read The Body Keeps the Score because I was a little nervous about it being a little triggering. So I don't
give it to clients in individual sessions over their couples or family sessions. And I've had a few return it with the self-awareness of I'm not
connection. It's a little more convoluted. But I would love to share that. So I'm going to share that in the chat and then read it off. So So the question is, how do you best navigate the emotional roller coaster that comes with an affair that ended in divorce? What are ways to push through the divorce / post-divorce process when you're already so exhausted from what ended the marriage? So it's a very tender question. And so if you have tools and insights, I put the question in the chat too, if you want to relook at it. And then I want to also check in with everybody. Are you guys good on time? Because I know we're at 4:52, so I want to be respectful. We've got a few more questions, but I want to really kind of dig into the heavy ones and help answer those questions.
For sure. I'd be happy to jump in and start this one off to give time to others that might want to add to it. So oftentimes when I have individuals that are coming to therapy with the potential of divorce and the potential of a separation, oftentimes well, this is twofold, right? So it touches on affairs and then it touches on divorce, right? So I think the first thing that pops up in my mind is that divorce piece. And perhaps we can follow up with the affair piece, but the divorce piece, oftentimes when I have an individual or a couple coming to me where they're considering separation or the separation has already been initiated, or they have neared the end of their divorce, because I think in the state of North Carolina, it requires a year separation. One thing that I honestly try to do with individuals is help them create a sense of hope outside and beyond the relationship, right? And I think some of our older methods were to kind of try to save the relationship at all cost, right? You can overcome this, you can endure this. And while that certainly is appropriate and the right answer in certain relationships, when a relationship has ended, it's essential to kind of allow for all parties involved to kind of feel a sense of hope, right? And why I say that is because so often it's a very despairing time, right? It's really hard to feel as if there's any type of future outside of what you've known, right? I feel it's almost like that divorce or separation season is a time to kind of settle the ground and kind of allow for both parties to feel a sense of stability, for there to be any sense of reconciliation, if that makes sense. Because when we're often in distress, when we're often in that fight, flight, or freeze response, which an end of a relationship can create, right? That can feel very traumatizing. We're not often making decisions. Do we continue in this relationship or not? From that prefrontal cortex, right? It's more about that survival brain. And that survival brain might influence us to stay in a relationship that perhaps isn't healthy, or to leave a relationship which in reality could be restored. So those are my initial thoughts from at least the experience I've had with couples that have considered separation, started separation, or endured a divorce.
Thank you, Abby, for starting that one off. That's a really tender conversation. And I think what you said about cultivating, or like one of the therapeutic goals being to really tend to hope as a thread of stability, to me, I hear that also kind of stretching into the thread of capacity. Because when I see that question, I literally visualize the roller coaster. And I also hear this person is depleted beyond belief because they're having to push through, and there's this other season or stage of, not to say that this is the experience, but like the dust and the swirl is so dense in the midst of even getting to the place of discernment for that happening, getting to the place of, what does my life look like now in this new season? From a somatic lens, but really just from the heart of me, thinking that resourcing all of the support, basic needs, food, nourishment, sleep, calling upon friends, calling upon community, and really just blanketing yourself with so much support, because that will allow for your body to catch up to what your mind is trying to make sense of. And wow, like it's just big work and requires so much big support and big holding. Thank you to this person for being so vulnerable to share the question.
Does anybody else want to add to this question? I think there was a little more to the question because this seems kind of aligned with the other question that was received. But it seems that there is a child that is involved in the divorce. So
I think
the other half.
I think part of the question also involved like this major military transition, right? There was a retirement, an affair, and divorce, and now post-divorce.
Yeah, so I put the question in the chat.
So much is going on in your life. Not one of those things would be easy. The culmination of all of that happening at once, I think emotional roller coaster doesn't come close to explaining what is happening to your nervous system and the trauma that it has sustained, and how prolonged you are likely in a nervous system response. And oftentimes when we get in these nervous system responses, it is nearly impossible to come out of it because you are in, your fight, flight, freeze, or fawning, whatever that may be. I just want to really honor that this is traumatic and this is a lot. And I loved what Abby said about hope. And I love what Caitlin said about resourcing yourself. There is no one answer that is going to tell you how to navigate this. You will navigate this, and you will feel your way through it, and you will navigate it as best as you can. And when you are through the storm, there will be space, and you will have a chance. And I encourage you to do the work to connect back with self, because this is beyond disorienting. And you are being robbed of a future you thought you had. After retirement, I'm assuming many years of committed to a specific lifestyle. So there's no one answer that will navigate you through this process. I loved what everyone else shared as, I don't want to use the word tips because that doesn't feel appropriate enough, but just how to insulate yourself a little bit as you navigate this storm. And know that we all are sending you all the love.
Yes, you're 110% not alone in this. And I am so grateful that you were vulnerable enough to ask the question and to find the support for yourself in this way. And if there are more things that come up, please know you do have this avenue to ask more questions, and we will provide the insights and the guidance that potentially could be helpful. But first and foremost, the hope. And yes, Caitlin.
Okay, there's just this, when you posted the second part of the question, I just feel compelled to acknowledge the last, or one of the pieces before we move on, and that's the part about you having a 7-year-old and wanting to ensure that your child doesn't suffer.
I saw that too.
I want to, I just want to speak into sort of a declaration that may feel hard to hear, but inherently your child will be impacted by this experience. And what the invitation is to create within your resource system so much safety in your body to be able to feel the ache of that, and to eventually work to release the personal responsibility of that from your body. Because yes, this will be a part of your son's experience, and through your resiliency, through your tenderness, through your care, you will have the capacity to hold how your child will meet it inherently. So there's both ache and acceptance, but also empowerment. That's like a swirl of that piece. That feels, I can feel it in my own body.
Thank you,
I
Susan.
I also want to add a part that kind of addresses the initial part of the first question, which was how do you, let's see, it was how do you best navigate the emotional roller coaster that comes with an affair that ended in divorce? And that is not just one trauma, that's multiple traumas.
Yep.
Right? That is, and similar to what Michelle said, that is multiple traumas after a lifetime of supporting and enduring a very specific lifestyle, right? That we all probably know very well. The military aspect of that, or the emotional roller coaster that comes with navigating a life of service and then retiring from a life of service, right? Which I imagine will come up eventually in this platform. But one thing that I want to offer is a book resource, which is called The Betrayal Bind. And that is another book that touches on the attachment styles and how not only is this a trauma, but this is an attachment trauma. And attachment is something that we start to develop from before we're born, right? In the womb, we start to develop an attachment to the individual growing us, right? And how attachment, similar to whether it's platonic or romantic or parent-child, it's essential to our well-being. And that's why an affair or a divorce or a separation feels so significant, right? So this book is one that I've found to be very helpful in navigating that very tumultuous, what feels very tumultuous or unsteady season. And the author has also experienced it themselves and is a therapist. So it's a very relatable read.
Thank you. Was it The Betrayal Bind?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, Michelle Mays. Okay, I'll share that in the chat. Thank you, Abby. It's an honor to be able to hold space in this way for so many people. There's obviously just a lot of tenderness in our community, and I think that it is so hard to be vulnerable and to ask questions, especially when you don't really know where to begin or where to find the support. And even finding, a therapist or somebody to talk to that you will feel connected to, that you will feel open and desiring to share that with. I think it is a relationship, right? Being whether it's a practitioner or a somatic practitioner, therapist, a counselor, etc. Like feeling that person's energy and vibing with that person, it can be incredibly difficult. So I'm so just really honored to hold this space with you all, and just hearing all the different perspectives and all of the insights from the different lenses in which you practice and even personal experiences. I really just want to share that and say thank you, and thank you to everybody that has asked these really beautiful questions so far. The next question, this is one in relation to a tool and resource that has been very helpful to me also. It is EFT tapping. I'm going to put the question in the chat. The question was simply, how do I learn more about EFT tapping? I would love to add this to my day. So I had shared a couple of days ago that I was having a really hard day and I was regulating with EFT tapping, and then I had an opportunity to go dance with some girlfriends, and that was incredibly supportive for me. So, Abby, I know you have been diving into that world, so I would love to hear from you on how to learn more and what tools and resources have been helpful to maybe dive into that.
Absolutely. So I want to start by saying I am not personally certified in it, but it is something that has been of significant interest to me. And I think it goes into that, the benefits of body work, right? So it is different. It is different than perhaps the somatic work we've talked about today, and in some sense, but it does integrate the body, right, in regards to experiences. So that's one reason that I appreciate it. And it's something that I actually not so long ago got to experience as a client. So I had the opportunity to join a group of women, military spouses, through the Station Foundation or one of their outpost kind of coordinators. And we had a gal come to us from Montana that led us through the practice. And she is someone that I will share her information with you all so that you have it, because she does offer virtual options. So, but let's talk a little bit about, and I'll keep this brief, but let's talk a little bit about what EFT is, for those that perhaps don't necessarily know. So it's referred to as emotional freedom technique, or tapping. And the reason we call it tapping is because that is the method in which we use to kind of process through the practice. So it's considered a holistic healing method that involves tapping on meridian points. That's, I feel, a little less familiar term, so I like to refer to it when talking to clients or friends as acupuncture points, right? And it doesn't necessarily involve, or certainly doesn't involve, needles, but it is tapping on specific parts of the face and upper body to help regulate your nervous system. So it is believed to help restore balance and energy within the body and alleviate emotional and physical distress. Oftentimes, EFT providers will have you think about a certain feeling, a certain thought, or a certain experience as they progress through the tapping series. It's rooted in the belief that imbalance in the body's energy system can contribute to negative emotions and experiences. And then by tapping on those meridian points or some of those acupuncture points, you can restore that balance and experience a sense of relief. And I will say, from a personal experience, I went through the process and there were certain points that were extra relieving to me. And there is theory. I don't know how scientific the theory is. There have been at least 100 studies on this that came back with positive results. But there is some theory that the certain points on your body, and I think the last one is back here on your back, is related to certain wounds or certain traumas. So I found that extremely intriguing. But when I went through the process, I experienced a lot of joy and laughter. So it was almost just very, and it was really cool to do it with a group of women. And each one had a slightly different experience, but it was very encouraging. Definitely got us in the moment. One thing I appreciated about it, it was very grounding. So it kept us in the present moment. So that's a kind of intro on EFT, or emotional freedom technique. And then I will share Kelsey's information. I'll send it to you, Alex, perhaps to share in the resources or in the posts that we're going to offer our audience.
Thank you. This app called the Tapping Solution. Nick Ortner is his name, and it has a myriad of different offerings, and some just like body scans. But there's also an Instagram account called Curiously Present. She is really delightful, and she actually has some EFT tapping that you can do with your children. But the last question is I've noticed my body holds on to stress and tension affecting my day-to-day. What are some tools to help me navigate this? And I feel like with us discussing EFT tapping and maybe some other solutions, I'm sure that there are a lot that we can provide here. Anybody feel called to answer? I know, Caitlin, you had put yourself in for this question.
Yes. I love that this person says, I've noticed my body holding on to stress and tension. There's like on a micro, most basic tool level experience that anyone can try. And I just think it's based off of the acronym BASE. So tuning into breath, action, sensation, and emotions. You can just start with B. B is breath. So noticing throughout your day, if you notice that there's a shift in the way that your breath is, the depth of the breath, the quality of the breath. This is just like one little way that you can just do a little check-in with yourself. And this is where the mind-body process kind of works together, because maybe you noticed that your breath became shallow when you thought about, I don't even know, trying to get your childcare. This is a big stress in my life right now. So there's resonance there for me because, yeah. So when I thought about that I had to do that, and then you had to do that, and then you notice that your breath restricts or constricts, that is just a very foundational but super supportive way of just creating a little bit more space. And sometimes noticing it is one thing, right? But then choosing or having the capacity to actually deepen the breath a little or meet it is a whole nother experience. But just like on a day-to-day experience, that BASE acronym, I'll put it into the chat, because there's so much possibility that can be, so much information that you can get from how and where and why, and the language of your particular body responding to your cues and your stressors. It's just like the initial piece of attunement for the world of somatics. And then on a macro level, or like a bigger scale way of supporting the tension, I am a spinal energetics practitioner, and this is a beautiful modality that works directly with the tension, the actual tension, the energetic, the emotional, the physical, the spiritual tension on and around the spine and the nervous system, since the vagus nerve runs right through that. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, gentle modality that essentially I'm not doing anything to the client. I just work with the resonance of the energy with the client, and all that we do really is create a new anchor for safety in the body to move from forward, like basically the anchor is trust. So then the body just unwinds naturally through the energy. It's basically like when you think about massage therapy, uses this beautiful massaging of the actual muscular part of the body. The spinal energetics is supporting a similar intention, but using energy, since that is probably how it came into the body in the first place. Like, tension doesn't just arrive on our body from brute force alone. It arrives because we're holding constantly, daily, all the time, unconsciously, our posture, our energy, our action, our breath. And that contributes to this overwhelming chronic or acute tension that comes in the body. So again, the cascade of talk here, because it's just my passion. Thank you.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was beautiful. Does anybody else want to share anything regarding that particular question? Yesterday, Shelly had sent me a beautiful video with regards to the first question that we talked about and navigating emotional intelligence. And she had shared this really beautiful acronym, RULER. So I'm going to let Shelly talk a little bit about it because I loved it so much.
Sure. It's not mine. It's from Yale. So
yes.
So thanks, Yale. But yeah, thank you for bringing that back up because I feel like when I got anxious earlier, it just ran out of my head. Yeah, so this is from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I just really liked it because I thought it was a great way of kind of like dissecting emotions. And, you know, when we were talking about for kids especially, but even for us. So R is recognizing. That can be like recognizing the feeling. Where is it in my body? What does it look like when I see it in other people or in myself? And then U is understanding. So understanding if we're talking specifically about anxiety, what is anxiety? To me, and when I kind of talk to some of my clients, I usually talk about fear of the future. We're kind of like, we're not in the moment. We're thinking about other things going on, all the what ifs that could happen. And maybe like, where is it coming from? And L is labeling. So using really good descriptive language of labeling what that emotion is. And then E is expressing. That could be cultural norms, societal norms of how we express those emotions. And then R is regulating. So all the different strategies that we can do to just kind of come back to ourselves.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really beautiful. I'm hopeful that all of this and the tools and other resources that we'll be sharing will be supportive to all of you that have asked questions. Again, I am so immensely grateful for the beautiful and thoughtful, heartfelt questions that we received and for all of the beautiful insight and wisdom you have all shared today.